Thanks to the cleaning lady, a profitable deal was finalized, leaving the boss in shock when he discovered her true identity, and that she had been working for him all along. Linda Collins was employed as a janitor at a construction company. Dressed in a blue robe, with a headscarf that covered her eyes and rubber gloves, she went unnoticed, blending in with the surroundings effortlessly. During her 2 years of service, Linda never made any connections with her colleagues. Her routine involved working diligently and leaving without socializing with anyone. She quietly went about her work each day, expertly cleaning windowsills, silently scrubbing floors, and efficiently disposing of office trash without ever lifting her gaze. Linda was mopping the floors in the CEO's office as the workday drew to a close. The rest of the staff had completed their tasks, turned off their computers, and were gradually leaving. Since the CEO had already left, Linda was free to continue cleaning. However, the CEO suddenly returned to the office and began discussing some matter with his deputy in the hallway. The CEO and his deputy were old friends from high school days and addressed each other by name but etiquette, which was amusing to hear from an outsider's perspective. Sometimes they would playfully banter with each other while maintaining a formal tone. They entered the principal's office, where Linda was busy tidying up. As she worked, she overheard a snippet of a business conversation. "Tomorrow, we have negotiations with Colin Goodwin's foreign partners, and there's no interpreter available. This could be a problem. It's not as simple as using an electronic translator, especially since it's not a commonly used language like English, it's Japanese. Have you come up with a solution?" the boss asked his superior. "Perhaps we could reach out to a translation company. They're just 2 floors up, so it's not far from here," the deputy suggested. Dwayne Price was visibly agitated, twitching like a toothache. "I warned you not to do business with them. Their Japanese translator is terrible, and their text translations are riddled with errors, like they were written by a high school student," Dwayne exclaimed. "I agree, Mr. Price. This could be disastrous. We'll lose the deal if we appear incompetent during the negotiations," Colin added, tapping his fingers impatiently on the table. At that moment, the janitor stood up from her bucket and gazed intently at the director. "What do you want? Have you finished? Please clear the office. We're in the middle of an important discussion here," the deputy grudgingly remarked. "Excuse me for interrupting. The thing is, Mr. Price, I speak Japanese fluently and can serve as a simultaneous interpreter," Linda responded, ignoring the deputy's dismissive attitude. "What? The cleaning lady? You expect us to entrust our negotiations to someone in a headscarf and rubber gloves? This is absurd," Mr. Goodwin exclaimed incredulously. "I just wanted to help, that's all. I understand if it's not possible," the janitor replied meekly before picking up her bucket and exiting the office. Wait a minute. Do you really speak Japanese?" the director asked Linda. "Mr. Price, are you seriously considering this? You surprise me, old man," the deputy interjected, raising his eyebrows in disbelief. "Wait, Mr. Goodwin. This could be our solution," the director said, gesturing to his friend to calm down. "I highly doubt it. Even if she can say a few words in Japanese, how can we trust her to interpret properly? And just look at her appearance," Colin Goodwin pointed out, pointing at Linda in her cleaning attire. "Appearance is the least of our concerns," the chief dismissed the deputy's objection. Mr. Price pulled out his phone and called one of his employees who was currently overseas and unable to attend the negotiations. If he had been in the country, the Japanese translation issue would have been easily resolved. "Hello, Ronald. I hope you're doing well. Unfortunately, your colleague is in the hospital with an ulcer, and we're in urgent need of a Japanese interpreter. Please help me. Talk to a comrade in Japanese." Mr. Price spoke into the phone, his tone urgent and serious. The chief extended his phone to the janitor, unsure of her name, possibly Tilda or Linda. As she removed her glove to take the phone, he noticed her delicate hand with slender fingers and a graceful wrist. although her nails were not polished and trimmed short. The chief was surprised by her unexpected talents, thinking to himself that she was a dark horse full of surprises. Meanwhile, the janitor fluently spoke in Japanese over the phone without any hesitation. After a brief conversation, she said her goodbyes and hung up. "What did you think of her language skills, Ronald?" "I must say, Mr. Price, I am absolutely blown away. She is remarkable," replied Ronald with excitement in his voice. "Could you be more specific about her language abilities?" "They are flawless. I haven't had such a pleasant conversation in a long time. She even recited classical poetry without a hint of an accent. Her language level is phenomenal. I would love to meet her in person when I come over." "Thank you for your input, Ronald. Your assistance has been greatly appreciated. Always happy to help. Please pass on my best wishes for a speedy recovery to your colleague with an ulcer. I will make sure to pay him a visit when I arrive. Have a good day." Mr. Price glanced at Mr. Goodwin before turning his attention to the cleaning lady. "Tilda, if you don't mind," he trailed off, pausing when she corrected him. "Sorry, Linda. Would you kindly change your clothes? We have urgent matters to attend to, and I may need your assistance tomorrow." Linda nodded, gathered her belongings, and departed. "You're quite the risk-taker, old man," the deputy muttered in a hushed tone. "Trusting strangers like that. Who knows who she really is? She could be a spy for all we know." A knock at the door prompted the response, "Come in." The deputy was taken aback by the swift reaction. "Is she a soldier? Ready to go on high alert within 2 seconds?" he pondered. As Linda entered the room, the director and his deputy were taken aback by her appearance. They were surprised to discover that the unassuming cleaning lady they had seen earlier was actually a slender, youthful girl with perfect posture, slicked back hair neatly gathered into a long ponytail. Despite being disguised under the nondescript blue cleaning uniform and a handkerchief, Linda was unrecognizable to anyone who had seen her in the hallway. Her transformation was remarkable, and the director and his deputy were left in awe of her impressive disguise. "Let's go," declared Mr. Price as he left the office, with Linda following closely behind. While in the elevator, he couldn't help but grin mischievously. "Aren't you going to ask me where we're going? What if I take you somewhere and hide you?" he teased. Linda remained unfazed, responding with a serious tone, "You won't take me anywhere, and you certainly won't be hiding me. We have an important negotiation tomorrow." Her response seemed to make sense to Mr. Price, who briefly smiled before continuing on their way. As they arrived at the upscale clothing boutique, Linda appeared visibly anxious. Mr. Price noticed her unease and attempted to ease her worries. "Don't worry, there's nothing wrong with the place we've come to. It's a production necessity," he reassured her. He then turned his attention to the girl consultant and issued a strict order for Linda's outfit: a business suit with a mid-knee skirt, jacket, blouse, and medium-heeled shoes. The consultant led Linda to the fitting room to try on the selected attire. As Linda tried on the outfits, Mr. Price scrutinized each look but was unimpressed. He shook his head disapprovingly and became increasingly frustrated. "Your employee lacks any sense of style. Get us another consultant or we'll take our business elsewhere. Fortunately, there are plenty of other boutiques to choose from," he exclaimed. The manager rushed into the boutique in a fluster, reprimanding one of his employees and quickly ushering her out of sight. "How many times have I told her to focus on work and not make eye contact with customers? We have a steady clientele here, but we may have to let her go," he thought to himself. Determined to salvage the situation, the manager personally selected a couple of suits and a few blouses. He presented them to Mr. Price, pointing out a suit with a tight skirt and a silvery silk blouse. The chief approved the selection and handed them over to Linda to try on in the fitting room. When Linda emerged from the fitting room wearing the chosen outfit, Mr. Price finally nodded in approval and said, "Well, finally, This is just what we needed." As Linda looked at herself in the mirror, she was amazed at how elegant and refined she appeared. It had been so long since she had felt confident in her appearance, and she couldn't help but feel grateful for the opportunity to dress up. As Linda admired herself in the mirror, the manager sat down in front of her and began putting on a pair of shoes. He couldn't help but notice how beautiful Linda looked in her new outfit. He thought to himself that she couldn't possibly be Mr. Price's wife, as the clothes she had taken off were not fit for a businessman's spouse. He even questioned why he was planning to fire an employee for not working when he himself was distracted by customers. Mr. Price abruptly stood up and announced, "We're leaving, and Linda, let's go in your new clothes. Don't wear your old ones around me anymore." He smiled at Linda and motioned for her to follow him. As Linda got up to leave, she noticed a price tag dangling from her sleeve and was taken aback. She gasped when she saw the price of the blouse alone. It was more than her monthly salary. She couldn't believe the cost of the entire outfit, including the suit and shoes. "Relax," the chief reassured Linda, placing his arm around her. "It's just necessary for the job." "Job," Linda echoed. "It's only a small necessity. You will be representing the company tomorrow, and we cannot afford to lose face in a negotiation." "We won't," Linda replied with a smile. "Exactly," he exclaimed, and they headed to the cash register to pay for the clothes. "Who is she, Linda?" asked Mr. Price. After the negotiations went brilliantly, Linda was immediately reassigned to a new position. However, when it came to her credentials, she didn't have them with her. "I don't have my documents with me," said Linda. "It's not a problem," replied Mr. Price. "I don't need a diploma, I need a specialist. The diploma can wait. By the way, I'll have the head of security help you with your papers to speed up their recovery." Linda's cheeks flushed red and she became agitated. No, that won't be necessary. I'll take care of him myself," she said. In the evening, Mr. Price and Mr. Goodwin were discussing work processes in Mr. Price's office. Linda was brought up, and the chief expressed his concern about her behavior. "Linda is doing a great job, but I feel something is bothering her. She used to be more calm and balanced when she worked as a janitor. Maybe she's hiding something and taking her time with the papers," the chief said, rubbing his chin. "You were right about her, Mr. Price," Mr. Goodwin cut in, thinking he was about to reveal a scheme. Mr. Price instructed the head of security to investigate Linda further. "Mr. Flowers, could you do me a favor and find out more about Linda? She's slow to file, avoids eye contact, and has to make repeated reminders. I don't want to fire her unless necessary. Maybe Mr. Goodwin is right and she's up to something." "Of course she is, Chief. I'll give you a report in a couple of days," the head of security answered confidently. Mr. Price nodded and continued to review the papers, his interest piqued. 2 days later, the chief of security returned to Mr. Price's office, barely containing his excitement. "Aaron, I see that you found something interesting. Did she leak information to the competition?" "No, Mr. Price, but I did uncover something very interesting. Take a look at this file on our cleaning lady." As Mr. Price perused the documents, he let out a whistle. Well, so that's why she's using a code name. The question is, how long will she continue to hide, and why? She's full of surprises." He leaned over to the speakerphone on his desk and instructed his secretary, "Kate, could you please ask Linda to come to my office?" The truth about the mystery woman was uncovered. For 2 years, she had been living in hiding after burying her father. Her father, David Collins, was a prominent businessman known for his ability to make money seemingly out of thin air. However, his wealth couldn't save his wife's health. Mary was stunningly beautiful, and they were a wonderful couple. David was tall, with bright eyes that seemed otherworldly. David lived for Mary, and he would do anything for her. He was ready to give her all the treasures of the world, buying homes for her in every country. But Mary laughed and said that she wanted nothing more than his love and a child to give him. She waited and hoped, going to consultations, choosing clinics, and undergoing artificial insemination procedures. She would sob after failed attempts when the embryo failed to take root. "Don't you understand? It's not just an embryo, it's our living child, David's and mine," she would tell the doctors. They consoled her and suggested she try again. Finally, they succeeded at a clinic in Switzerland. Mary was 4 months pregnant, and everyone was afraid to breathe on her. The fetus was developing well, but they feared for her health. She received numerous hormonal injections that helped her, but later she began to feel faint and often tired. Out of nowhere, she developed a blood disorder, making continuing the pregnancy impossible. The doctors insisted she have an abortion and receive treatment for the blood disorder. Mary packed her bags and ran away from the clinic. "How could you lose my wife? What do you mean lost?" David yelled at the nursing staff. "But this isn't a secure facility," the doctor explained, "and we don't have prisoners here. She left on her own." Mary was in her 4th month of pregnancy, but serious concerns had arisen about her health. Despite numerous hormonal injections, she was often fatigued and began to faint. To make matters worse, she was diagnosed with a blood disorder that made continuing the pregnancy dangerous. The doctors recommended an abortion and blood treatment, but Mary left the clinic before receiving any further medical attention. David Collins was furious with the nursing staff, demanding to know how they could have lost his wife. However, the doctor explained that they were not a secure facility and could not prevent patients from leaving on their own. Despite David's anger, Magoo had disappeared without a trace. Eventually, Mary resurfaced and revealed that she had been renting a room from an old lady nearby. As her pregnancy progressed, she returned to the clinic to give birth. David's phone rang one morning, displaying an unknown number. He answered in a dry tone, "Yes, I'm listening." "David, I'm at the clinic. Come over. I'm waiting for you," a silent voice on the other end of the line said. It was his wife, Mary. "Mary? What do you mean?" "Yes, I'll be right there," David replied, his emotions beginning to fray. He rushed to the clinic and was immediately escorted to her room. Overcome with relief, he kissed Mary's hands and asked, "Why did you do this to me? I almost lost my mind." Mary explained that she felt as though the whole world was against her and that she should have gone into hiding to give birth peacefully. Despite her initial fears and doubts, she expressed her happiness and gratitude toward David, saying, "Thank you for everything. I love you very much, and I have not lived my life in vain. I'll leave a mark on the earth with genuine confidence and tears of pride." As David Collins gazed upon the newborn girl, he felt no affection towards her, only annoyance. This wrinkled creature with a pink, toothless mouth had taken Marie away from him. Despite undergoing therapy, his beloved wife had quietly and quickly passed away like a flickering candle. It was as if David had died inside along with her, burying his heart that had ceased to beat. He even considered ending his own life. However, Linda, his little girl, fell into the caring hands of a nanny who took care of them both. Gradually, David began to come back to life and started to notice his daughter. He was amazed to see that Linda was a spitting image of Marie. The nanny, Julie Douglas, was happy for David's progress and quietly said a prayer to ward off any bad luck. She muttered, hoping that the girl would at least have a father, even if she had lost her mother, touch wood. David had never felt any affection towards his daughter and had not shown her any love. However, she had grown up well cared for and had never been denied anything. David had also never looked at other women until that fateful day. He had promised his daughter that he had one more thing to do before going straight to her. A Spanish partner had arrived, and they were negotiating the building of a shopping center with a large landscaped area planted with trees. The Spanish partner's interpreter was a young woman who almost ruined their negotiations because David was mesmerized by her and forgot to listen to what was being said. The young woman's name was also Maria, and she resembled his late wife. She had the same gestures and look. For the first time in years, David forgot his promise to his daughter and did not come home that night. Instead, he stayed with the beautiful girl and fell in love like a boy. It was as if his Marie had come back to him, an exact replica. He proposed to her right away. After a splendid wedding, the newlywed wife moved into David's house, where things took an unexpected turn. Mrs. Douglas, the nanny, sighed as she combed Linda's hair and warned her about the potential cruelty of a stepmother. She empathized with the girl and promised to support her no matter what. Unfortunately, Maria had no interest in being a mother to Linda. Instead, she doted on her own son Tom, who was just as selfish and entitled as his mother. Linda watched as her father became completely absorbed in his young wife, oblivious to the fact that this Maria was not the same woman he had once loved. She saw her father lavishing attention on his new wife and forgetting about the special moments they used to share. As Linda looked on, she realized that her father had replaced her with a replica of his lost love. David's wife, Maria, convinced him to send Linda to study in London, claiming it was for the girl's own good and a chance for a better education. Linda pleaded with her father not to send her away, but David remained firm in his decision. Although initially taken aback by David's suggestion, Amy reluctantly agreed to the prenup. However, her true nature soon revealed itself as she began to systematically poison David with chemotherapy, hoping to inherit his entire estate upon his death. In summary, David's suspicions were unfounded regarding the conversation he overheard between Amy and Tom, but his investigation into Amy's deceitful behavior led him to take drastic measures to protect himself and his assets. Unfortunately, Amy's greed ultimately led her to attempt to kill David in pursuit of her own financial gain. "Fool, unspeakable fool, my daughter, will you forgive me?" These were the words of regret that Mr. Douglas uttered, realizing too late that he needed to make amends with Linda and Mrs. Douglas. Tragically, David's untimely death meant that he was unable to rectify the situation before his passing. Although he had filed for divorce and rewritten his will to exclude his unfaithful wife, he was unable to be discharged from the hospital in time to make it home. Upon his passing, Linda, David's devastated daughter, flew in for his funeral only to be met with cruelty from her stepmother. Mrs. Douglas refused to allow Linda into the family home to freshen up and change into mourning attire, informing her that her father had left everything to her. As it turned out, Mrs. Douglas had ulterior motives for excluding Linda from the family home. She had a plan to break her stepdaughter and force her to sign over the inheritance to her. With cunning manipulation, Mrs. Douglas intended to brainwash Linda and coerce her into signing over her father's assets to her own name. Linda's already tumultuous situation took a turn for the worse when a thief stole her suitcase containing important papers, documents, and money from her hotel room. As if that were enough, someone broke into her room that same night and attempted to strangle her. Terrified, Linda hid herself in a panic, not knowing where to turn. Fortunately, Linda managed to escape from the assailant's grasp and raised the alarm, causing the intruder to flee before the police arrived. Although the attacker was long gone by the time the police arrived, Linda still requested to be taken to the station where she could file a report for her missing documents. Marie, meanwhile, was livid and frustrated with her stepdaughter's escape. She cursed her own short-sightedness, realizing that she should have kept Linda close and cultivated her as an ally, rather than driving her away. Now that Linda was gone, Marie knew that she would have to go to great lengths to find her and continue with her own plans. She lamented the missed opportunities and the uncertainty of her next move. After obtaining a temporary certificate instead of a passport, Linda rented a room in a small apartment building on the outskirts of town and took a job as a cleaner at Mr. Price's firm. One day, she revealed the truth about her situation to the company's chief and the head of security. The two men listened in shock as Linda told them her story, and the chief of security urged Mr. Price to help her seek justice. He then revealed to Linda that she was the rightful inheritor of all her father's properties. Linda was confused by this revelation, as her stepmother Marie had told her that her father had left everything to her. However, the security chief assured her that Marie was lying and encouraged her to stand up for her rights. Despite her fear of Marie, Linda was determined to take action. The security chief tried to calm her down and offered her a glass of water to soothe her nerves. "Linda, we truly want to assist you," the chief expressed his sympathy. "We can resolve this in no time, and there's no need to be afraid. Aaron can accompany you today." He paused before adding, "But why wait until tomorrow? Go now and settle family affairs." In fact, Linda and Aaron had harbored feelings for each other for a while. However, they maintained their distance, as it was not considered appropriate to have a romantic relationship at work. Amy Oliver was taken aback when Linda and a muscular man appeared at her doorstep. "What are you doing here?" Linda asked Amy. "In case you didn't know, she lives here," Aaron interjected, pushing past Linda and carrying her suitcase inside. Amy was at a loss for words. "But you don't live here, and you can pack your bags now," Aaron continued. A man wearing a satin bathrobe descended from the second floor and started questioning them. "Amy, who is this? Why is Linda here? Did you invite her? And who's the big guy?" "The big guy is her fiancé. Linda doesn't need an invitation. She's the rightful owner," Aaron replied calmly, not bothering to introduce himself. Linda blushed with embarrassment. During the night, Aaron was awoken by a strange noise coming from the garage. When he investigated, he found the family trying to pack as many valuables as they could into their car. Aaron shook his head disapprovingly and warned them against robbery. "Plus, there's the incident at the hotel," he reminded them. "You've got a long way to go before you can relax on vacation." The man tried to deny any wrongdoing, but Aaron wasn't buying it. "I don't scare easily," he said with a stern expression. "You'll both be locked up for a long time." Thanks to Linda and Aaron's efforts, justice was served, and the con artists were brought to justice. However, it soon became clear that there were many other things going on behind the scenes that they were unaware of. Linda later hired a babysitter and offered her the role of being there for her instead of her grandmother. "Mrs. Douglas, you don't have to work anymore. Just be there for me instead of my own grandmother," Linda said. "Oh, sweetheart, I'm going to die of boredom. I'm used to working," Mrs. Douglas replied, hugging Linda. "And I'd love to be a grandmother to you." "Thank you." She hugged her even tighter. Then she whispered, "Linda, honey, is that big guy guarding you now? He's huge. He scares me." "I'm not afraid of anything with him," Linda smiled confidently. "Nothing in the world." "Thank God for that." "Then I'm safe for you," said Mrs. Douglas, wiping her eyes with her apron. "And I'm going to make you some pancakes. I really am." Mrs. Douglas then headed to the kitchen to make pancakes with cherry jam as a treat for her precious granddaughter and her fiancé.